In this video, you will discover 3 signs you should consider rebranding your podcast, and of course, the exact steps you can start taking today if the answer is yes to a rebrand. So look, my name is Anthony Winery. I'm the co-founder of GetMoreListeners.com, a company helping entrepreneurs of podcasts turn a slow growth show into a rapidly growing positive ROI show. Over the last 4 years, I've interviewed and coached 350 plus podcasters, and I'm also the co-host of Why Your Podcast Isn't Growing, which generates around $10,000 of attributed sales each and every month. Around 80% of our clients have to go through a major rebrand in order to have their show move in the right direction. So this is such a fitting video for you to watch right now. So sign number 1, you're attracting the wrong audience. You're in podcasting for a little while and your numbers might look good, might look bad. It doesn't really matter. But the more important part is you don't seem to be talking to the right audience. You're not engaging the right listeners. You're not making sales, and the engagement from the listeners you are engaging, there doesn't seem to be the right fit. An example of this could be a podcast that's targeting high net worth individuals and investors who aren't beginners. But when you receive emails or when you receive communication back and forth with your audience and listeners online, you can tell they're just beginners. They're not actually experienced investors. Now, if your podcast is for high net worth individuals who are experienced investors and those your clientele you want to attract, but your podcast name, for example, is completely wrong and you're now attracting beginners, then of course it means you're attracting the wrong crowd. And this could be a perfect reason to get a rebrand. You're simply attracting the wrong people. There's a disconnect between the people who are actually tuning in versus the people who can actually get the most value from your show. So that's the first sign, and it's honestly a really common one. The second sign is simply you have a stagnation when it comes to growth, or maybe your growth is actually declining. So your podcast plateaus, here we go, which is what no one really ever wants when you have that plateauing. I've experienced this. It's a horrible feeling, but it's another reason where it's another sign that you might need a rebrand, because despite your efforts, your listener base just isn't expanding. You might actually notice a lot of listeners leaving your show, not coming back for more. And this is a great sign that maybe you have to switch things up. Now, you shouldn't make this change instantly just because you've stagnated, let's say for 1 month. But if you see that as a clear trend of month 1, month 2, month 3, and then month 4, and it's kind of stalled, maybe it's time to now think about rebranding the show, because rebranding can help you massively move your growth in the right direction, attract more of the right listeners, and essentially have a much better show that's far more aligned. Then the final step is simply your interest shifts or the market's interest shifts. So for example, if you're a podcaster back in the day talking about crypto, I'm sure crypto would have blown up. And then when crypto is not as popular, it kind of quiets down. But your interest might have changed. Maybe you started in crypto overall and then you realize investing is actually where you're best suited at. Maybe stock investing specifically, maybe real estate investing. Whatever that might be, your interest might shift over the years. When you first initially start a podcast, you might have had an idea, maybe as to get yourself going for business, for different reasons. And then as you've done more and more episodes, your vision for the podcast shifts. Who you want to target with a podcast changes. So as your interest shifts, you might realize and start to recognize, okay, maybe now that my interest has shifted, maybe it's time for me to rebrand, to communicate more so what my show now is all about. So again, a quick recap. Number 1, you're attracting the wrong audience. There's a disconnect between the people you want to reach versus the people who are actually listening to the show. Number 2, you have a stagnated growth, or maybe your growth is actually declining and you want to spice things up. You want to change things up because you realize that, if you keep doing more of the same thing, you're going to get more of what you already have, which is something that isn't working. A stagnant growing show. A stagnant growing show. It doesn't quite make sense. A growth that's stagnant when it comes to growth. And then the final reason is you're shifting interest. You just have a new interest, or maybe you've done some more research and realize a particular topic that you consistently cover on the show is far more attractive to the listeners you want to reach. Therefore, you want to shift again to kind of match the demand of your audience. So cool. That's awesome. I get those signs. But what does that actually mean? What should you actually do? And what are the components that make up a rebrand? Here are the specific changes you should think about when going through a rebrand. A rebrand is simply a shift in 2 things: who your show is really for, what it's about essentially, and then 2, the external factors, like how are you going to package the show to attract those people coming in. The main bulk of this shouldn't be about your website and about the show name and about all these other fancy things. It really does start with initially the topic you want to cover. What does it mean, right? It does start with the topic you want to cover on the show. So this should be something that you're either passionate about, or something to us, if you're a business owner and entrepreneur with a podcast, really is less about passion, it's more about who can provide the most amount of value to you. Like, what audience can you provide the most amount of value. So that's the topic you're covering. So for me, it's podcasting. For you, you might realize you had a podcast all about like escaping the 9 to 5, where realistically you can provide the most value on a topic where it's all about, real estate, because that's your zone of expertise. Then go down that route. The second thing is looking at your target audience. So who are you specifically addressing to your audience? Like understanding where they are in their journey. I gave an example earlier of if you have a podcast all about investing and it's for high net worth individuals who aren't beginners but experienced investors. So really think about again who you want to target with your show. Like, yeah, you're covering this topic, real estate, but is it for people who are experienced? Is it for people who are just beginners? Or is it for people who, are passive investors? Like, really specify who the show is for, who your target is within the topic you're covering. And then, of course, what problem are you solving? Like, what's the specific problem you aim to solve for that audience? Again, go into real estate niche. Is it about funding specifically? If so, focus in on funding. Is it about finding deals and flipping deals? If so, focus in on finding deals and flipping deals. How to find the best deals, how to flip the best houses, like what things to look out for. Again, it's not just about the topic you cover or the targeting. It's about what specific problem are you going to help them solve. Because let's face it, a beginner investor in real estate versus someone who's super experienced, they have two completely different problems that they're kind of aware of and that they want to solve. So specifying this even further makes a huge difference. The fourth thing is content delivery. You don't want to just create content like everyone else. It's really important if you're going to go through this rebrand, you go out with a bang. So ask yourself, how can I deliver this content in a new and unique way? Like what can I do about this podcast about real estate investing? How can I make it and deliver it in a unique way? Maybe everyone else is doing interview-based shows. Maybe you focus more on solo shows that are 10 minutes and value packed. Maybe everyone's super serious. Maybe yours is a lot more engaging and entertaining. So really think about your other competitors. What are they doing? And how can you do something a bit different to stand out in terms of how you actually deliver the content? Don't just make it the same old podcast like everyone else. Think about your tonality, the style, the format, uploading schedule, and then think about also, again, making sure you stand out. What's your unique angle? What's your unique hook? And finally, the packaging. So great, we now know what topic you're covering. We know who the target audience is. We know what problem you're solving, and we know the unique way we're going to deliver that content to that audience to attract the right people. Now it's about the packaging. Now it's about how do we make sure our cover art, our show name, our show notes, our episode title, our content strategy is going to attract, engage, and retain the new listeners we want to attract. If it's about real estate, and your podcast is like, real estate, real talk real estate, that was the name of your show. Well, guess what? Real Talk Real Estate doesn't specify who the show's for. Whereas if it's for like real estate for experienced high net worth individuals and that's a show name, you're speaking directly to that target audience. Your cover art needs to be professional. That needs to change. Your show notes needs to talk about, again, the people who are experienced. Your show description should also talk about the people who you want to attract and the pain points that they are going through themselves. And the content you cover on the show, again, needs to be in line with the people you want to attract. But in order to attract them in the first place, your cover art, show name, show notes, show description, episode titles all need to speak to the new audience you're trying to reach. And that's really the final part when it comes to rebranding your podcast. So look, by focusing on these core elements during a rebrand, you essentially ensure that your podcast not only is attractive, but also super engaging, that it actually aligns with your audience needs and your own personal business goals. And this approach is so powerful because it guarantees the rebrand goes way beyond the superficial changes of website, but it's actually providing real value to your new audience and existing listeners. So there you have it, the clear signs that you should consider rebranding your podcast, and of course, how to actually go through this process and the key things and components you should be looking to change. My name is Anthony Manera. You've been absolutely fantastic. If you enjoyed this, feel free to go back and binge our entire back catalog. You've been absolutely fantastic. I'll catch you in the next one.